It's time for the JMRA Football Podcast, a podcast for the fans by a fan. Yeah! Here's your host, Derek Jones.
Hey everybody, it's another edition of the JMRA Football Podcast. I am your host, Derek Jones, with you today as we recap Week 3 of some very interesting NFL action. We'll get to it in just a few moments, but first, let's give you the rundown. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok by searching Joe Montana's right arm. It is kind of fun on the Facebook side of things, just to take you a little bit behind the curtain with Facebook. I love sharing the pictures and videos of the 49ers fans, and it's really, in my view, because I'm biased, it's a little community over there over on Facebook. So I have a great time there, and I love seeing all the feedback and people taking strolls down memory lane. So it's really developed into something I've had a tremendous amount of fun doing and bringing the people in. And hey, that's what it's all about. Look, no matter what we say here about the teams, this team sucks, that team, I hate them, blah, 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 blah. The NFL, it's one big fan community. That's what it is. And no matter where the peak of your interest is or was, this stuff is awesome. And one day, I hope 20, 30 years from now, when I am sitting somewhere, hopefully in warm weather, I will be on a computer talking like a madman and commenting like a madman on social media about things that happened 30 and 40 years ago. And hopefully people will be doing the same about talking about people like Josh Allen and talking about people like Patrick Mahomes and all that good stuff. Kind of the way we talk about Joe Montana and Randall Cunningham and Dan Marino and John Elway and guys of that era. I think it's really neat to kind of see people take that run down memory lane to kind of relive their thoughts and kind of go through the way things were when they were living this stuff in real time. Last week was the 33rd anniversary of the famous Eagles 49ers game at the Vet, and it is stunning to me that whenever I post stuff about that game, invariably I'll get someone who is from California who says, I was at that game in Philly. It stuns me. But, hey, man, it's all good. I love it. I'm glad I'm able to do things like that so you guys can kind of check it out, and girls, of course. Check out what's going on Facebook. And, of course, our other social media platforms. We're cooking, or at least starting to cook on TikTok, so that's been a blast, too. So check that out. Okay, let's take a look at 5 things that caught my eye from week number 3. Number 1, there's a reasonable chance that the Eagles are going to have home field advantage in the playoffs, I think. So the Eagles play, along with the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Giants, by winning percentage heading into the season. They had the 4 easiest schedules in the NFL, which means one of those 4 teams is going to play well above board in terms of the record. I think the way things are trending right now, that's going to be the Eagles, because the Eagles, you look at their schedule, the Eagles have, I would not say a wildly challenging schedule. And look, one of the reasons why it's easier this year is because, A, they play against their NFC East brethren. Also, they get the AFC South, which is terrible. Also, they get the NFC North, which outside of Green Bay is terrible. So you have kind of all these things working in their favor. Now, when you take a look at games that might be tough for them, if you want to say at the Giants might be tricky, if you want to say at Dallas is tricky, fine, I'll give you that. Game against Indianapolis in Indy. You play Tennessee. You play Jacksonville, which now all of a sudden is a sneaky game. That's on Sunday against their old friend Doug Peterson. But the hardest game they have left on the schedule is Green Bay. They're going to see New Orleans later on the year, but Jameis Winston has back issues, obviously, with the injuries he's going through and trying to play through right now. So I think it's going to be tough. And there was I believe it was on, I want to say 538. It looks like the Eagles are favored the rest of the way. Every game the rest of the season, the Eagles are favored. So I think we're looking at a scenario where if the Eagles stay healthy, they can win 13, 14 games. I think that's where we're heading. Now, are they that good? I think that's the big question. I'm not sure they're that good. I'm not sure they're that good, especially in the prism of they're not playing the Rams. They're not playing the Bucs. They're not playing really a schedule that is going to test your mettle in the NFC. They don't see the 49ers either. So a lot of these teams that might be problems for them come January, they don't play them because of how the schedule fell. And I know you play who you play, but still, that is kind of crazy that their schedule is that easy. So I think the Eagles could very well be one of the top seeds, if not the top, in the NFC, barring something crazy happening, because it just looks like between how bad Washington is, between how bad the Giants might be, and between whatever is kind of happening with Dallas right now, I think it's going to be tough for anybody else to win the NFC East other than the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 2, do the Broncos have a Russell Wilson problem? We're going to dive into this in a little bit more detail coming up in a little bit, but I am very, very, very afraid if I'm a Broncos fan. Because one of the things that bothers me right now is that Russell Wilson has not elevated the level of this team. When Tom Brady joined Tampa, right, you could see that after week 1, after he's going through figuring out who's who and all that stuff, you could see that this team was becoming something. Took a little while, but you could see they were becoming something. This Denver team is not becoming something. They're not becoming anything. And he is at the core of the problem. His numbers aren't great. He had another game where he did not throw any touchdown passes on Sunday night, and that game was awful. And like I said, we'll get into it, but just not a great start from Russell Wilson. And I think you do have to be concerned, because Russell Wilson, they paid this guy over $200 million to step in and be a guy who leads them not only to the playoffs, but to the Super Bowl. And he looks far from being able to do that. And I think also, too, I don't think he's that dude anymore. I just don't think he has that in him. As I hate the phrase, but I don't think he has that dog in him anymore. And I think that's going to be a tough thing to deal with. You look at his numbers so far, his passer rating is 83.2. His QBR is like 21st in the NFL. It's like 45.2. He's got 2 touchdown passes and an interception. And his completion percentage is under 60%, which is awful for this era. I'm not feeling it with Russell Wilson right now in Denver, and they've got to figure it out, because they have too many good players in terms of skill position guys at wide receiver to be this lousy on offense. Speaking of wide receiver issues, can the Bucs fix their wide receiver problems? Now, the bigger question here at hand is, can the receivers get healthy? And that ultimately is the issue here. Mike Evans gets suspended. Chris Godwin's dealing with a hamstring. Julio Jones has a torn PCL. So I think if you're Tampa, the hope is you get 2 of those 3 guys back in functioning order. Obviously, you're going to get Evans back, but you've got to make sure you get either Godwin or Jones back in stride. Now, I've said this in other shows. This was a tough stretch for Tampa because they have a hard schedule between opening up against the Cowboys, the Saints on the road. You come home to play the Packers. Now, next Sunday night, you're going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs. Not easy. And in order for them, I think, to be at the Super Bowl level, they've got to have help at wide receiver. You take a look. Remember, they go through the end of that regular season last year without Chris Godwin. Mike Evans was banged up. Obviously, Antonio Brown wasn't there. And they had to figure out things offensively, and it took them a little while to do so. But by the time the playoffs rolled around, they handled the Eagles, and then they had that wild game against the Rams in the divisional round that they lost. But despite all that, kind of in the background was the fact that they had Rob Gronkowski. They don't have him as well. So when you look at who was on the field in Super Bowl 45 against the Chiefs, Evans, Godwin, Brown, Gronkowski, none of those guys were in uniform last Sunday when they took on the Packers. You're not getting AB back. Not that you want him back. Gronk doesn't seem like he's coming back at this point. So you're going to have to hope that the receivers kind of make do. And the receivers that they had obviously came up very small on Sunday, as we will discuss. Number 4, the AFC West, colossal disappointment. Colossal disappointment. The Chiefs' offense has been underwhelming. I think you could kind of sort of see that coming at the beginning of the year, just based off of how things were trending. With the fact that, look, it just doesn't make any sense for them to keep the same level that they've played at over the last couple of years without Tyreek Hill. That wasn't computing for me. You knew that was going to be tough. So they've had their issues on offense. The Chargers with the massive amount of injuries. Now the offensive line is getting beat up. Rashawn Slater's out for the year. Justin Herbert has the rib injury suffered during the Thursday night game against the Chiefs almost 2 weeks ago now. That's difficult for the Chargers to deal with. Keenan Allen's been banged up. He missed the last game against Jacksonville. They're hoping to have him back for this week. But man, it is early for these guys to be beaten up this much. And that's what's happening in Tampa. That's what's happening in, obviously, Los Angeles with the Chargers as well. The Raiders have been a colossal failure so far. They have not won a game, which is not great. And the Broncos, we talked about them. You know, I think this is more so about what the Broncos and Raiders haven't done as much as it is about what the Chiefs have done so far and what the Chargers have done so far. Those back-end teams of the division in the Raiders and Broncos have not been good. And that has really dragged the value of the division down, in my opinion. And it's been one of the big disappointments this year. I think a lot of people expected shootouts and all these crazy things to happen during the course of the games, and it hasn't materialized as of yet. And lastly, how many good teams are there for real? Do we know how many good teams there are? Okay, so I typed out who I thought was good, all right, as of last night, okay? The Bills, the Dolphins, the Chiefs. I'm still going to keep the Chiefs there. Again, it's one game. They're 2-1, so it's not time to go bananas yet. The Ravens, the Eagles, the Packers, the Bucs, and the Rams. So that's 8 teams. The Jaguars and the Cowboys are on the border. They're right on the cusp. They're good. They're good, but they've got a chance. There's still room for growth from those 2 teams. So you're looking at, again, 8 teams that are good, in my opinion. That's not a lot. I'm not even saying like Super Bowl contender. I'm talking about just being like a functional NFL franchise right now. It's just those teams. Just those teams. And, you know, Jacksonville could very well take a big step towards kind of hopping into the discussion, because if they beat the Eagles on Sunday, they're going to go to 3-1 with some relatively easy games on the horizon. So we'll discuss that when we get to the rest of the slate. What a bizarre weekend was in NFL action. We saw some really good stuff. We saw maybe one of the 5 worst primetime games in NFL history. We'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about the JMRA Football Player of the Week and a whole lot more. But first, let's start out with the last game we just watched. Cowboys and Giants. The Dallas Cowboys defeat the New York Giants by the score of 23-16 on Monday Night Football in a game where you've got to give a lot of credit to the Cowboys. I think in previous years, maybe they would have lost that game even with Dak Prescott at quarterback, but they got some big plays from CeeDee Lamb. They got some big plays from the defense. I think I saw the number that they pressured Daniel Jones like 35 times. It was most times he'd been pressured in his career as a quarterback, which is incredible. But the Cowboys did a great job with that defense. And, you know, Michael Irvin had a wild comment comments about the Cowboys' chances and their pass rush. And I want to play that quickly because this man sounds like an absolute maniac talking about the Cowboys' defense earlier this morning on First Take.
And what you're looking at on that defensive line is something finger licking good special. That's what I'm talking about. All five, they just be coming rushing and just getting it a quarterback. It's finger licking good special, and we can get somewhere with that. I'm going to tell you this too. I have been hurting because I have been having to tell the truth about how great Philadelphia look. And they do look great. And I said there is no chance. But with that finger licking pass rush, we do got a chance. We'll get a chance to get to Philly because we got that finger licking pass rush that is so good, and a pass rush can stop everything. Now, we should talk about C.D. Lamb. Did you know the number 8 stands for new beginning? That's why 88 is so special. God knows I needed so many new beginnings, and 88 can take a new beginning. The Bible talks about men like this. They call them mighty men of valor. You might mess up, but you would do everything you have to do to make your mess up right. And that's what C.D. Lamb did last night. He did everything he needed to do to make his mess up right. Yes, I dropped a big pass, but I came back and I had a C.D. Lamb drive. You want to talk about a playmaker? That's a playmaker. He made the plays. And then the one-handed stab for the grab of the touchdown on the go-ahead. It's what playmakers do. It's what 88 do.
I mean, that sounds like a man who has partially lost his marbles, but I mean, I can see where he's coming from. I will say this about the NFC. The NFC stinks this year. However, there are some good defenses in the NFC. And when we talk about the Eagles here and what they did on Sunday, I think that's going to be one of the burgeoning storylines coming up. How are these defenses going to deal with the Eagles? Because we know one thing, a lot of these good NFC defenses, they won't see the Eagles because the Eagles play absolute dreck on their schedule. But we'll have more on that in a bit. Great win overall for the Cowboys. I think when you take a look at what it means for them, 3 games coming up, Commanders, Rams, Eagles. Next 3 for the Cowboys. You will see Dak Prescott probably sooner rather than later. You wonder if this Cooper Rush run, and it's not like he's Kurt Warner out there coming off the bench, but the team does look a little bit more confident. The team looks a little bit more under control. And yeah, they're playing well right now. But I think that will expedite things a little bit more for Dak Prescott to come back. But the Cowboys are 2-1. The Giants drop back to 2-1. And yes, the Giants, that 2-0, a little bit of a mirage. Nice team in terms of a team that plays hard, but they're not 2-0, 3-0 good. Sorry, just how it is. Dolphins 21, Bills 19, crazy game. Everyone by now has seen the wild Ken Dorsey meltdown in the coach's box. Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. It's so crazy because Dorsey, and people forget this, Dorsey is a famous figure in college football because Ken Dorsey quarterbacked arguably the greatest college football team of all time, the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. Google the amount of NFL talent that was on that team. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. One of the great teams of all time. He was obviously very frustrated, and I got to be honest, who can blame him? The Bills ran 90 plays. They held the ball for over 40 minutes on Sunday and did not win the game. They missed opportunities. Josh Allen missed the throw late on the 4th down near the 10-yard line with a chance to put the Bills ahead in the game. Couldn't get that done. And unfortunately, you're looking at a situation here. If you're Buffalo now, you go to Sunday and you're on the road at Baltimore. That's not going to be easy. So tough back-to-back stretch here for the Bills. And you've got to feel like they lost this game as much as Miami won it. Miami made the plays. Kudos to them. But in the end, the Bills, man, they left points on the table. They did not execute in situations where they have executed this year. And the fact that you ran that many plays you ran 90 plays and don't allow really the Dolphins to have the ball for a substantial period of time, that's a damaging loss. I mean, sure, they can make up for it down the line, but man, that's not a great sign. They were obviously exhausted from the heat, and that's a big factor. You look at something just as simple as when you see these Florida teams, one of the things they like to do is they like to make the road team wear the dark colored jerseys because, they're thinking, okay, they're going to sweat a little bit more in the dark colors. And that makes sense. And the Bills had their dark colors on, and boy, did they sweat. They were exhausted after that game on Sunday in Miami. And they battled, to their credit, they battled through some injury issues with the secondary. They have some injury issues along the offensive line as well. So they had to deal with that, and still it was a 2-point game. I think the one thing that I am seeing more and more people say is that Josh Allen can't be this much of the offense for Buffalo, and I do agree to an extent. They're going to have to get plays from the running backs, and I think that, to me, that's really the big factor here. They've got to get something out of the running backs that's somewhat meaty and substantial, because, yeah, it could very well be tough for Allen to kind of produce and win a Super Bowl playing football this way, because, again, you've got a long season, and for him to just kind of keep things going physically is that's a challenge for sure. So we'll see what happens with the Bills. Good win for the Dolphins from their standpoint. Obviously, there are people I think that don't necessarily take them seriously because of Tua. And boy, speaking of Tua, how about that bizarre concussion situation where it looks like he's woozy heading off the field, and it's later reported, he just had a back injury. He's fine. I mean, he didn't look fine to me on TV. Did not look fine to me, but he made it through, and his Dolphins are 3-0 now. There are only 2 undefeated teams left in the NFL. One is Miami, the other one, obviously, Philadelphia. And for the Dolphins, what an opportunity it is to try to keep this thing going as long as you can unbeaten, because this is the 50th anniversary of the 72 Dolphins, one of my least favorite teams in NFL history. Why, you ask? Because, look, when you go undefeated, you're going to brag about it. And boy, do they brag about it. They love letting people know that they went undefeated back in 1972. But the Dolphins now at 3-0. We'll see if they can kind of hold down the fort as this season wears on atop the AFC East. Let's go over to, we talked about hot weather in Florida. Let's go over to the other big game in Florida last Sunday. The Packers beat the Bucs 14-12. So basically, this game came down to the 2-point conversion that was missed by the Bucs after Tom Brady hit Russell Gage in the end zone for a touchdown to cut the game to a 14-12 ball game. There has been some discourse about what happened with the play clock during the 2-point play. There are some people saying the clock started with 20 seconds left instead of the 25, which, if that's the case, that is a problem on the side of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we've seen now a couple times this year where teams have run out of time kind of setting up that 2-point play, and it happens to the Bucs. I don't know. Aaron Rodgers is talking crazy after the game, like he saw something on the Jumbotron that he relayed to the defensive coordinator and the whole deal. Look, Tampa just didn't execute that 2-point play. They did a lousy job with it in terms of getting that delay of game, because if you look at what was supposed to happen, that was going to be a Leonard Fournette run up the middle, and it looked like he had a pretty easy, clear lane and path to the end zone. So if he gets that there, then who knows how things play out from there for Tampa and Green Bay. But a disappointing effort by the Bucs, and they've got problems at wide receiver, as I said a little while ago. They have fumbles from Russell Gage and Brashad Perriman, and those fumbles killed them because those are run-stopping drives and run-stopping plays. It's really, if you're a Bucs fan, you've got to just be absolutely at your wits' end because of the Mike Evans thing. If he's out there, you'd have to think this is a different game, and you'd have to think that maybe the Bucs score a little bit more than 12 points against the Packers defense. But it's tough sledding for Tom Brady right now with his top 3 receivers out last weekend. we'll see if those gentlemen join him once again on Sunday when the Chiefs play the Bucs for the first time since Super Bowl 55. And by the way, side note with that game, Hurricane Ian making some waves, unfortunately, throughout the Florida area, including Tampa, which could be a problem in terms of that game being played Sunday. It sounds like they have a backup plan. If they don't play it in Tampa, they'll try to play it somewhere in the Midwest. But as far as the Packers go, by the way, good win for them. You know, they did what they had to do. They came out early, established tempo, established control. Aaron Rodgers hit some throws early on, and that really put the Packers in control of the game, up 14-0, and the Bucs, it was an uphill climb for them from there. And you have to give credit to Tampa for fighting back, but you also have to tip the cap to Green Bay, who did a very good job of establishing the tone early on and putting the Bucs on their heels. Eventually, Tom Brady got something going in the end zone, but they did not get the 2-point play, and obviously that is the end of the Bucs in terms of their 2-0 start, and they get ready for the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Speaking of Tom Brady-centric things, his former team, the New England Patriots, lose to the Baltimore Ravens 37-26. Mac Jones gets hurt late in that contest. High ankle sprain. It is suspected that he will be out multiple weeks for the Patriots, and that's a big blow. That's a big blow. I was not bullish on the Patriots this season, and I'm especially not bullish on them with Brian Hoyer as their quarterback. That is bad. That's very bad. And Mac Jones wasn't playing well either at the time. You know, Mac Jones turned the ball over multiple times, threw some bad interceptions on Sunday. Meanwhile, Lamar Jackson on the other side, 4 touchdown passes and an interception. He's playing at an MVP level right now. He leads the NFL in passer rating and touchdown passes. And, you know, you give that guy too many cracks at it, he's going to make you pay. And that's exactly what happened on Sunday as the Ravens grabbed the 11-point win over the Patriots. I think the Patriots are cooked, man. I think they're done. I think it's going to be tough, really, for the Patriots to make the playoffs. And it's not even as much as this Mac Jones thing. I just look at their offense. It's just boring. It's just not a cohesive unit. They're sloppy. I just don't feel like things are going to go their way as far as making the playoffs go. The Colts, shocking. The Kansas City Chiefs, 20-17 in Indianapolis. Patrick Mahomes throws for 265 yards on 20 of 35 passing, 1 touchdown pass, 1 interception. That happened late to seal up the game for the Colts. I just think, with all due respect, respectfully, I think this game is more so about the Chiefs than it is the Colts. And the Colts, yeah, sure, they won the game, but you take a look at some things here from the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes led the Chiefs in rushing with 26 yards. Are you kidding me? They ran for 58 as a team. Like, that's awful. That is terrible. You have your quarterback leading you in rushing. Like that, I don't know. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So the Chiefs basically, you know, they fall behind the 8 ball early on in the game. They eventually go up 17-13 in the second half. And then the Colts, you know, to their credit, the Colts take advantage of some mistakes. Chris Jones gets called for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, yapping a little bit too much to Matt Ryan. That led eventually to a score for the Colts, kept the drive alive, and they go on to win the game after the interception of Patrick Mahomes. You know, look, the AFC South is wide open. The Colts are 1-1-1 for heaven's sake, so that's as wide open pretty much as it gets. As far as the Chiefs, I don't know, man. Again, this was kind of my concern with them. Who's going to get open? Who is getting open on this team? Like, that's a major, major issue. Who is getting open on the Chiefs? And right now, it's Travis Kelce and not much else. And that's what I think we all kind of sort of expected as the season started up for the struggles to happen. And yeah, I think we're there. It's going to be very interesting to see how that Tampa game plays out on Sunday night. You know, the loser of that game will have lost 2 straight games in a row, which is rare for both sides, especially in the last couple of years. But I think if you're the Chiefs and you can't get it done on Sunday, oh boy, that is not a good sign for the future, because You've got to be able to show that you're a potential Super Bowl contender at some point, especially in games like this, these high-profile games. And I don't know, man. I don't feel super great about it. Eagles 24, Commanders 8. The Eagles make quick work of Washington. They sack Carson Wentz 9 times. Another huge day for Jalen Hurts. There's no question. He's definitely an early season MVP candidate. Devontae Smith had a big-time performance. A.J. Brown once again with a key performance as well. You know, Philadelphia is driven by this passing attack right now, and that's the big thing. The rushing attack is okay, but it's been the heavy lifting of the passing game that has really surprised, I think, many people so far this season. And credit Nick Sirianni and obviously Jalen Hurts as well, who's put in the work during the offseason to get better, and he has gotten better. Now, the question is, how legit is it? How legit is it? Because you worry about defensively, you worry about the adjustments being made down the line. You know, you look at the schedule and how easy it is. Can the Eagles just kind of coast through the regular season until they see Green Bay later on in the year? I mean, they've got Tennessee. Who knows if Tennessee will be a functioning playoff contender at that point? Jacksonville on Sunday. I mean, now all of a sudden that's kind of a test for the Eagles. So that, you know, I know Eagles fans are kind of upset because people are saying, oh, you know, people are saying that we can't win because, you know, our schedule's too easy and it's not fair, blah, 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 blah. It's like, look, you play who you play. You play who you play. But I'm a big proponent in iron sharpening iron. And I don't see any iron being sharpened right now for the Eagles. You know, you're going to be coasting here for a few weeks until things kind of heat up as you get towards Thanksgiving. The Jaguars 38, the Chargers 10. We talked about the injuries in Los Angeles. You know, Justin Herbert's still banged up, and I think he may not be healthy for a while. Rashawn Slater, we talked about his injury situation. The Chargers face some challenges here trying to recover from those injuries, and between that and kind of figuring out what they do best, I think you have to give a lot of credit first to Jacksonville for successfully kind of thwarting the play of the Chargers. I think that the Chargers kind of maybe seemed like they played like they just assumed Jacksonville was going to come over to the old stadium there and just roll over and be done with it. And that's not the case. You know, the Jaguars, led by Trevor Lawrence now, who has really started to blossom into a solid quarterback. Oh man, not a great 60 minutes of action for the Chargers, but credit to Doug Peterson and the staff for getting his team ready and taking advantage of an undermanned Chargers team. I think that's a sign of a good team. You know, when the opponent gets banged up or whatever's going on, you've got to step up and make some plays, and they were able to do that to their credit. Here's Jacksonville's schedule coming up, okay? Eagles Sunday, right? Then they play the Texans. And then after the Texans, they play the Colts. And then after they play the Colts, they play the Giants. They could be looking at possibly what? That's, you know, they're 2-1 right now. Maybe lose Sunday to the Eagles. That puts you at 2-2. You win the next 3. Could be 5-2 to start the year. How about that for Jacksonville? I think there's a legit chance that could happen. They're better than Giants. They're at worst just as good, if not better than the Colts and Texans especially. So, man, going to be a very interesting setup here for Jacksonville over the next handful of weeks. Broncos 11, 49ers 10. This game was just garbage, utter garbage. It's one of the worst primetime games of all time, in my opinion. There were combined 17 punts. Jimmy Garoppolo runs out of the back of the end zone at one point, pulling a Dan Orlovsky for safety. It was just bowling shoe ugly, as a famous man once said. Russell Wilson on the other side of it throws for 184 yards and no touchdowns. You watch the Broncos, and it's just like, man, they're doing what they can to survive, and they're trying to hold off, but it's not taken. It's not taken at the moment. And I got to tell you, you know, I think it's a major problem for this Broncos team to struggle this much. And look, the 49ers are a good team. I think they'll be better with Jimmy Garoppolo as the season wears on, but man, just not a good way to win this game if you're the Broncos, and not a good way to lose the game if you're the 49ers. You almost want to just give both teams a loss and just say, can we just come back later on at some point? Because, yeah, it's tough. But, yeah, I thought that game was terrible. And Russell Wilson has got to be able to run the ball effectively. He doesn't want to do that as much, seemingly, which is a problem. He's got to be able to do something, because to just kind of have that offense put out 11 points. I know the 49ers defense is good, but, man, that just not something that is impressive at all. Again, it's 17 total punts in a game. Just utter nonsense on people's TV screens for 3 hours. Utter nonsense. Elsewhere, by the way, yeah, the Broncos are, what are the Broncos now are 2-1. I mean, they're a horrible 2-1 team. The 49ers, on their account, they dropped to 1-2 with a bad loss to the Bears. This one, they kind of let their old friend Russell Wilson off the hook, and they let him escape, and they let him get away and make a couple plays, and then that was that. So we'll see how things shake out moving forward. Vikings 28, Lions 24. Lions way too aggressive on fourth down. They were 4 of 6 on fourth down, but the Lions as a whole were 3 of 16 on third down. So that led to some of the going for it, as it were. But I just think, they zigged when they should have zagged. The Lions just got way too aggressive. And it's, you see this happen from time to time. You have a team that is trying to get out of the doldrums. They're trying different things. They're trying to get out of this, swoon of being a bad football team and being a bad organization. But you don't have to go for it this much. 4 out of 6 on fourth down, which is a great conversion rate. But Dan Campbell, after the game, admitted that maybe he shouldn't have gone for it as much, or at least trusted his team a little bit more in terms of how they could have handled things when you're talking about a field goal, or you're talking about, potentially going for it. Just not good. Rams 20, Cardinals 12. By the way, the Lions at 1-2, the Vikings at 2-1. I don't trust the Vikings at all. The Lions have a good offense, but they got to get stops defensively before you can trust them. Rams 20, Cardinals 12. The Cardinals fall to 1-2. Just a professional game by the Rams. They were in control throughout. The Cardinals pretty much kick field goals by and large. The Cardinals, you hold the Rams to 20 points, you think you got a chance there because Cooper Kupp is held to 44 yards receiving, so you hold him in check. You run the ball better with Cam Akers, but it doesn't really translate into this rock'em sock'em performance offensively for the Rams. But in the end, they get the W, and they get the win by 8 in, I wouldn't say a impressive fashion, but certainly, I'll say this. The Rams look like they know what to do now that they've been through a Super Bowl run. I think they're going to say we'll see in January and let the chips fall where they may, because I think they're pretty confident in their ability still. And as long as that's the case, I think it's going to be tough for the Cardinals or the 49ers and obviously the Seahawks to remove the Rams from their seat of power atop the NFC West. Falcons 27, Seahawks 23. Not a lot to say about this game, although the Falcons have been very feisty early on this season. They had a chance to win all 3 games first 3 weeks. Think about that. They win this one by 4 over Seattle, but they've had a chance. Had a chance against New Orleans, had a lead. You look at the game last week against the Rams. If not for a great play made by Jalen Ramsey, you could be looking at another tough outing in this situation for teams going against the Falcons. The Falcons very well could be 3-0. Very well could be. So kudos to the Falcons for the win. The Titans 24, the Raiders 22. Yeah, look, the Titans, I think, have their hands full this season. So do the Raiders. I was not impressed with either team, but they managed to get things done. Speaking of the Titans, to grab a win, their first of the season. And for the Titans, you've got to figure out, if we can't get Derrick Henry going, how are we going to move the football? I think that's a major question mark moving forward for Tennessee, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be as easy as it was last year at times, moving the football, whether it be through the air or on the ground. Elsewhere, Bengals 27, Jets 12. The Bengals still don't look right to me. They bounced back, though, and grabbed the win against the Jets. Not much to say about that one. Pretty cut and dry, paint-by-numbers kind of game. The Bengals did what they needed to do to get the W, and they did. Bears 23, Texans 20. Poor Davis Mills. Late in the game, under 2 minutes left to go, he throws an interception to the Bears on his side of the field deep, and that leads to the Bears kicking the field goal and the game not going to overtime. So, or ending up with a Texans victory. So you have to feel for Davis Mills a little bit there on that errant throw. Panthers 22, Saints 14. The Panthers have a little frisky team. They're not very good. I don't expect them to be in the playoffs, but looks like they have some juice to them. So you have to be at least happy with that. Christian McCaffrey's doing reasonably well. Baker Mayfield hasn't hurt you a ton yet. So I think you look at those components for the Panthers. Yeah, hey, they're hanging around. Record probably should be a little bit better than what it is so far. But credit to the Panthers for grabbing the W. And then Thursday Night Football, Browns 29, Steelers 17. Not much to say about that other than it's probably time to look for a new quarterback if you're Pittsburgh. I mean, if you're serious about salvaging this season and trying to get to the playoffs, you know, I kind of get a little bit of what they might be thinking, but man, it's time to shake things up at quarterback. And, you know, you got to find out what the kid can do, put Kenny Pickett in, see what happens, and then take it from there. But the Browns beating the Steelers by 12, you know, the Steelers, they need an overhaul at quarterback. And I think that's going to have to happen for this team to move to the next level. And with that, the only thing we have left to take care of, the JMRA Football Player of the Week.
The JMRA Player of the Week.
How about this stat line? 218 yards passing, 4 touchdown passes, 107 yards on the ground with a touchdown. Not a bad day at the office for this week's Player of the Week, Lamar Jackson. What a performance by Lamar Jackson. When you look at Lamar Jackson's numbers, there's no question he should be in the running for MVP, or at least in the early discussion. I mean, for heaven's sake, remember last year when people were talking about Russell Wilson, or was it 2 years ago, talking about how Russell Wilson didn't have an MVP vote, and it was going to be his year to get an MVP vote and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And guess what? It never happened. It never happened. So one game at a time, but I think you look at this performance by Lamar Jackson against the Patriots last Sunday, special. Again, 4 touchdown passes, 218 yards passing through the air, 107 yards on the ground with a touchdown. An electric performance by Lamar Jackson, who I would not be surprised if he is on the move towards another MVP. I mean, the guy is trying to get paid, and who can blame him? And with that, we've reached the conclusion of another episode of the JMRA Football Podcast. Until next time, happy football, everybody. See you.